briefly explain what your business Samasource does?
Sure. Samasource is a 501c3 nonprofit that connects people living in poverty to work over the internet. So essentially we take these large outsourcing contracts that involve basic data entry and human judgment, and we break them down into very small tasks and send those tasks out to small computer centers in 5 different countries in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Haiti. And we train poor people to do those tasks and earn income from companies like Google, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
And would there be a lot of women involved in these projects?
Yeah, about 50% of our workforce is women.
Fantastic.
And we have some partners that are all women. It turns out that women are really naturally good at this type of work, and we've seen a lot of demand in rural communities among women for basic jobs. So.
Oh, isn't that encouraging? That's brilliant. Have you ever had to source angel investment or venture funding to get your project?
Have I?
Tell me about
That's
it.
my job. Yeah, so the challenge with being a nonprofit is that you have no equity. Technically, you are owned by the general public, and you have a board of directors who act as trustees.
Right.
And so the challenge, especially for social entrepreneurs who are building new models, is that traditional philanthropy isn't well suited to funding new ventures. Traditional philanthropy is well suited to funding more traditional, more established nonprofit organizations. And there's been a new movement around venture philanthropy, taking the traditional model and turning it on its head and really looking to venture capital as a model for philanthropy. But I think we're a long way away from having the kind of resources in the nonprofit world that we do in the for-profit world to fund new enterprises. Okay. So the challenge we've had is trying to build a company, and we run in many ways like a normal business. It's just that all of the revenue that we get gets reinvested by default into the business. So it's been challenging to build the infrastructure of a business without a significant amount of starting capital.
And so I guess you've had to be really creative with your model as well, in the sense that you're sort of breaking out of those old traditional ways of doing things.
Sure, we've had to be incredibly scrappy about getting resources. We try not to pay for things when we can avoid it. We shared office space for a really long time. A lot of our infrastructure is donated. We have people working with us from companies like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley who take huge pay cuts to work with us.
Right.
But I actually think that receiving less funding early on forces you to be disciplined about the way you grow the business and not do stuff that you shouldn't be doing because you have extra money. So it's been, I think, a bit of a blessing for us.
Yes, I would agree with that actually, just in ordinary startups, that would be my philosophy. And I think that it does trigger a lot of creative sort of evolution and ways of doing things. Good on you. What personal lessons, being a woman, have you taken out of your successes and or failures in the venture field? Or investment field?
It's funny to put the woman lens on it because I don't think of myself, I just think of myself as me and as an entrepreneur, and a lot of the lessons I've drawn about entrepreneurship have been from leaders in the Valley who happen to be male or who happen to not be Indian. So I don't put myself in a category, but in terms of lessons learned, I think the most important lesson is persistence. Early on, I sort of imagined that I had this great idea and that other people would understand the idea and buy into it and get excited about it. And it took me a long time to get the sort of traction that we have now.
Okay.
And it felt like a long time, but people outside the organization have said, wow, you've grown so quickly in 2 years and you already have all this legitimacy, but to me it took forever. So I think that the first lesson I learned is that if you have an idea, particularly in the social space, my idea was to take people living in refugee camps and in rural parts of India and plug them directly into the digital supply chain for companies like Google. And most people just, laughed when I told them that and said that, oh, what about all these operational issues, and there's no power in some of these places, and those people can't do this work, they need bed nets, they don't need computers. I heard every objection you can imagine. I think the biggest, boldest ideas are those that require a lot of stamina to get going and a lot of persistence on the part of the entrepreneur. So that's the first lesson I've learned. And I'd say secondly, I think that women, I hate to make generalizations, but the women that I know confirm this, and the studies that I've read confirm it. Women are less aggressive than men in raising money and in pitching an idea. And if you're trying to get legitimacy for an idea that hasn't yet materialized as a company, you have to be aggressive. You have to sell the vision 5 years out. You can't be selling what you currently have, which is you and your friend's futon and your laptop.
Yes.
And I think that women are far too conservative in business settings, particularly when it comes to raising money and selling a vision.
Okay.
For whatever reason,
Okay.
I find that conservatism can be really good for the business. I have a COO who's much more conservative than I am and much more risk averse, and that's wonderful because
Yes.
she makes contingency plans and
Yes.
ensures that our books are done correctly.
Yes.
But in terms of the founder, you need to have somebody who's going to aggressively sell the vision and aggressively make people buy into this idea. Otherwise, it will never get launched.
And not take things personally, not take rejection personally, and those sort of things.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And, there are a million stories I could tell you about,
Right.
Awkward situations. Being a young woman founder in a field that's dominated by men has its challenges and its benefits.
Yes.
I think I've experienced both.
Great. I mean, not great that you had the bad things, but great that you've seen it all, and that would make you very experienced.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger,
Exactly.
right?
So what attitudes then towards you being female have you noted from the venture community? And I guess that's a good follow-on question.
Well, I think Silicon Valley is pretty meritocratic.
Okay.
I really think that, if anything, it's been easier for me to get visibility. I won't say anything beyond that, but it's been easier for me to get featured in blogs and journals and magazines because everybody's looking for a woman founder in technology.
Okay.
And if you're a woman founder who happens to be a minority, you hit, you kill two birds with one stone, and they want you even more. And my challenge has been that I don't want to be known because we are headed by a woman minority founder. I want to be known because we're doing something useful.
Yes.
And I don't want the kind of coverage that comes from being a token anything.
Yes.
And so sometimes the challenge is that I feel like we're being asked or we're being featured in something because of who I am, and not because of what our organization is doing.
Right.
And if so the downside of that is it makes me less confident as a founder that we're being recognized because of stuff that we deserve. So or recognized deservedly, I can say that.
Okay. It's a moral conflict for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this myth that it's harder to get visibility as a woman. I don't think it's harder to get visibility. I think where there's substance to that myth is that it may be harder to actually close funding deals. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that people fund companies or people fund other people who look and act and are from the same social milieu as them.
I keep hearing this since I've been in the Valley. That's what I hear.
I think something like 85 or 90% of venture capitalists are men from a certain socioeconomic background.
Yes.
And I'm sure that plays into who they eventually fund. I don't think it's conscious, and I don't think there's any malice on the part of people in this community. And I also think that if you run a good venture capital firm, your job is to look at results and to try to find people who are going to deliver results. And the best firms are highly meritocratic in the entrepreneurs they select.
Fantastic. That's reassuring. What qualities do you think women entrepreneurs need specifically for sourcing venture? You've mentioned the persistence and not taking things too personally and being a little bit more aggressive and holding that passion and vision and not giving up. Is there anything else that you could think of that would assist women?
Well, if you're in a male-dominated space, maybe you have to play like a man.
Okay.
And
Tell me more about that.
Sure. I mean, I just noticed that a lot of deals get done over drinks or over, at events that tend to have more men at them, like golfing events and, bars that I probably wouldn't go to with my girlfriends.
Yes.
And the reality is that if that's the turf you have to play on, even if it's harder and even if it's not really fair, that's the turf you have to play on. And I actually think women who know how to do that well have an advantage over men, because if you're the only woman on the golf course, you know, you have a lot more visibility, and it's probably going to be easier for you to talk to people than it would be otherwise. So.
And there's sort of a shock value there. I remember when I was in Dublin with the Dublin Chamber of Commerce, and they had their annual ball, and I went into a bar that had Dublin Chamber of Commerce on it. I was the only woman in there, and I'm giving out my business cards, and one guy looked at me and said, "What the hell are you doing in here?" And I said, "Well, I'm Dublin Chamber of Commerce." He said, "This is only for the guys." But I'd shocked them all so much that they were taking my business cards.
And I think that's fine. It may be uncomfortable sometimes, and occasionally I'll be at a tech conference and people will ask me to meet the CEO of the company and assume that I'm some hired woman who's there to hand out brochures.
Right.
And as demeaning as that initially feels, ultimately that's great. I can get all sorts of information out of somebody who stops by the booth and doesn't think that I'm the CEO. And is it bad for my business? No. That people don't think I'm the CEO? Not at all.
Yeah.
So I think that we have to sort of get over some of that as women, and we also have to understand that if we're playing in a man's world, there are lots of things that we can do to play better than men in that world. That aren't about imitating men or acting like them, but are about being ourselves and being confident. And the last thing I'll say is that I really do think California especially is a place that rewards results. I think that this is, Silicon Valley wouldn't be the way it is without people from all walks of life coming through here and being successful. And I can point to many female CEOs and minority CEOs who've done well here. So I think if you have a good business to sell and you've built a good team behind it, and there's a market out there that you're tapping in a smart way, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get funding. And it could be that I've been very lucky. I'm a nonprofit too, so I haven't had to walk Sand Hill Road like other women founders. But I think we've had tremendous support for Samasource, and I think it just speaks to the fact that if you have a good idea and you know what you're doing, people will be around to support you.
Thank you.